Alrighty, good evening, everyone. This is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys for tonight's weather chat. We are tracking a very strong area of low pressure that is making its way across parts of the Midwest this evening. And by strong area of low pressure, at least millibar wise, pressure wise, this thing is actually pretty strong for it being kind of an overland low pressure system. So it is producing quite a bit in the way of some snow. Snow is starting to begin to kind of taper down across some parts of the Midwest, but still ongoing in others. Places like Chicago, across northern Illinois and Wisconsin, still seeing quite a bit of that snow. And places around the Omaha area saw quite a bit of snow yesterday, especially north of the city there of Omaha. So without any further ado, folks, let's take a look at our good friend, the surface chart, huh? This is actually a very strong area of low pressure. 979 millibars right now is what it's at, right over northern Indiana. So for this being, overland type of low pressure system, that's pretty strong, to be quite honest with you. But as mentioned yesterday, the colder air that would be needed to really make this a very strong snow event isn't necessarily there. There is enough of it that it is certainly producing some snowfall across parts of Nebraska earlier on today, across parts of Iowa still ongoing, and right now around the Chicago area, back over towards Milwaukee. But really, this system just is a couple degrees too warm to really be seeing widespread snow, if that makes any sense. Nonetheless, that cooler air is kind of starting to wrap its way around the backside of this low pressure system. And actually, we talked about, sometimes before the life cycle with an area of low pressure. And basically, what happens after a while is the colder air will progress faster than the warmer air will be moving. And eventually, that cold front does cut off the warm front. And basically, what that is called is occlusion. And might be a little hard for you to see here on your map, but right there, there's a little purple front located right there. You see how the cold front is now kind of ran out ahead of the warm front. And so now what we're seeing is cooler air going over cooler air. So eventually, this will kind of spell the end of, at least one particular area of low pressure. But with the way this system is, uh, this is not the end of this overall system. So that is kind of a little bit of a look at the surface chart of what's going on. But before we dive more into that, let's take a look at this cold front here that is pushing its way right now across the deep south. That cold front did help to produce some showers and thunderstorms earlier on. However, you might notice there is another cold front that is kind of running a little bit more out ahead across parts of the Carolinas. If we were to take a look at the upper level chart, what we're actually seeing here, more or less, is this is still the same system. But if we were to take a look at the upper level winds here of this system, take a look. You'll notice that there is a lot of purple across parts of the deep south. Those are much stronger winds. In fact, we're looking about 18,000 feet up at this point, and the winds are about 120 knots, which is getting close to about 130 miles an hour or so. Now, that is very strong winds, certainly producing enough in the way of wind shear. And there is some strong storms down there. We'll take a look at that radar here in just a little bit. But what we also see with this type of a setup is this tends to be kind of an area where we could where we see what is known as upper level divergence. The winds begin to slow down a little bit, and naturally there's more air leaving a space than there is going into it. So a lot of times with these type of systems, what we see in this type of a setup is that a new area of low pressure will begin to form, all attached to the same system. This is all associated with the same kind of upper level pattern that's going on here, but at the surface, a slightly different area of low pressure located a bit further away. And that one naturally has its own fronts too. And that is what is helping to produce some of those strong showers and thunderstorms across parts of the Carolinas and even down into Florida right now. Now, this system is going to continue as we go through the overnight hours. That upper level low will track over the Great Lakes area. And that area of low pressure that we're looking at there on the surface chart, probably going to maybe deepen just a little bit more. They're probably not going to, have a rapid intensification at this point. It's probably starting to near the end of its, intensification process. But the one that is down across parts of the Carolinas could maybe try to get a little bit more strong. So let's go ahead here really quickly and we'll take a look over at our good friends at WPC here, kind of how they have this thing shaping up. And we'll go ahead and make sure that this is an updated map. Forgot to do that. All right, so let's look at the overnight hours. There it is. This is our main area of low pressure. Again, as mentioned, probably could, maybe intensify just a little bit more. And naturally, we kind of see our cold front now really beginning to push off. What you don't really see here is that secondary area of low pressure, which again is just going to more or less be associated with this section of the front back here. But you get the idea. It is technically still there. You can even see it a little bit here on the isobar map. Now, with that in mind, you can see too that the colder air is now beginning to cool itself down around. There were some rain showers across Ohio earlier on today. We could maybe see those starting to transition over to some snow showers overnight tonight, albeit by this point, probably not going to be seeing quite as much moisture as a lot of that will have already moved out of the area, but still maybe enough to give a dusting or so, or maybe even a little light accumulation in some spots. And that is going to be good news because there's going to be yet another system that's going to be coming on the heels of that. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, though. Let's focus on this area of low pressure as we go into the day tomorrow. You can see that it'll work its way up into New England, even though the main center is still going to be back out across parts of Ontario. Again, that new area of low pressure will develop even further. And by the time we get towards tomorrow morning out there across New England, that's going to help to kind of continue the longevity of this system. And a lot of times with these stronger systems, this is kind of the pattern that we see. We'll have a main area of low pressure at the surface. Eventually, that includes, we'll see a new area of low pressure picking up further off towards the east. That one might include, and then we'll see another one. So sometimes we can kind of get these little patterns as long as the upper level setup is good. So that is what that thing is going to be doing, producing some rain. Again, as mentioned, not a lot of cold air, at least in place with this particular system. So that's why we are dealing with quite a bit of rain. If this were to be November or maybe even early December, this would be a little bit more typical. But since it has been kind of above average temperatures, especially across parts of the upper Midwest for the month of December, well, that's what we're dealing with right now. Not as much colder air available for this particular system, but still enough to obviously get the job done and for some locations. Now, for those of you who might have been also looking at this map, you'll notice there is some more activity happening here. So let's go ahead and we're going to flip on over to our good friend, the upper level chart here. So we're going to go ahead and flip this guy up here and let's take a look at the upper level chart. Focus mainly on this big image. These are all just, this is an average of all these little images you see here. And there's actually much more than that. But regardless, let's just kind of take a little bit of a look at this. So as we go into the day tomorrow or later tonight, you can see that upper level low making its way across the central part of the Great Lakes. Again, we have this nice area of upper level divergence. That's where we're seeing that kind of new area of low pressure that will eventually take over this system. That is going to continue to spin around as we go through the day tomorrow. You can see it hanging out around the Great Lakes, but it's not going to be sticking around the Great Lakes. It is going to be making itself move further off towards the north and to the east, thus maybe helping to continue that series of low pressures even more so. But what you might also notice is that we're not quite done. We got this little disturbance right across the central part of the U.S. We have this little shortwave trough here that's going to work its way through. That is going to be a quick moving, more or less kind of a clipper system that will help to maybe bring a couple of inches of snow across some parts of the upper Midwest. However, the next big player is this guy coming off the Pacific coast. Notice that's a nice little jet streak you got there going on, some higher winds likely in there, good amount of vorticity, that's a spin, and that is certainly probably going to help our next system to develop and take a look as we go our way into the end of the work week. You can see that next upper level trough digging itself out of the Rocky Mountains and swinging its way through the central U.S. and back into the Great Lakes. Yes, folks, that means there could very well be yet another system that is going to try to maybe produce some snowfall. So, certainly an active next couple of weather days here. So, this is a very nice little trough that's going to be positioned here. And actually, behind that is going to be the possibility for maybe, some below average temperatures across parts of not just the Midwest, but maybe some other regions along the Great Lakes, too. Again, this will probably be a little bit cooler than normal air mass. Certainly needed to, as again, these places have been kind of warm, at least during the month of December. So seems fitting that we would finally start to see some of that winter weather returning. So a lot of things going on here in the weather. Again, this tends to be the most active time of the year, at least when it comes to these low pressure systems. And now that we're possibly going to be getting some cooler air trying to, maybe even some more cooler air trying to work its way in, that next system could be on the fun side too to keep an eye on. So going to be kind of busy over the next couple of days. Let's go ahead and take a look back over at the kind of the forecast map here, and you can kind of see what I mean. So there's that little shortwave trough in the middle there. You can see it producing some snow across parts of the upper Midwest as we go into the day tomorrow night, and then even as we go into part of the day Thursday. And then here comes our next system, that upper level trough digging its way out of the Rocky Mountains. There you go. This is our next wave here. Now, again, as mentioned, this one may have some cooler air to work with, and so we could maybe be seeing a little bit more of a snow event rather than a rain event per se. And again, there's more that's going to be going on with this thing. As a matter of fact, let's look a little further out here. Let's take a look as we go into the day on Friday. This is a pretty decent sized low pressure yet again, maybe not quite as strong as the one that we've had, but still enough to get the job done. Likely going to be seeing quite a bit of overrunning here, and we'll talk more about that in a different weather chat here. Why these lows tend to produce some pretty decent sized snowfall. It's actually quite fascinating. You can see probably going to be a little bit of a windy day across parts of far western Montana there, tight pressure gradient. You can see that high pressure building across northern Alberta. That'll probably be a pretty decent size high pressure, about 1045 millibars there. So pretty good, especially for this time of the year. Certainly going to be having some colder air to work with. And again, that is what this area of low pressure is going to try to feed off, at least some of that initially. As we go into the day on Saturday, look at that thing. It just kind of explodes. That's what's kind of what's expected. So now it will probably be at least on par to the area of low pressure that we're seeing right now. However, you'll notice this thing is probably going to have a little bit in the way of colder air to work with. So this could end up being a little bit more of a snow event. Could even end up being a little bit of a lake effect snow event, especially across some parts of Lake Superior up around Michigan. We'll have to kind of see how that shapes out to look. But overall, looking like as we go into the weekend, it'll be probably on the snowy side across parts of the Great Lakes, and it will probably be on the windy side and certainly a little bit cooler. And you can see how that high pressure continues to just kind of filter itself down across parts of the upper Midwest. And as we go into the day there, it really kind of begins to extend itself. So we will probably be seeing some cooler temperatures, probably below zero, at least up around where I am, as we go into the weekend. Look at that thing. That is a pretty good size low pressure. So that one is actually, if that does shape out to be, that is a pretty textbook situation of low pressure here. As a matter of fact, even just going based off this forecast map, you can kind of get a good idea here of the structure of low pressures. There's that colder air. You got that warmer air that's also trying to move, but the colder air will advance quicker. You can see how that cold front eventually just kind of pushes its way forward, cuts off that warm front, and then you can see how it just kind of continues on that track there, and likely a new area of low pressure will develop around this area. So certainly going to be, again, as mentioned, another couple of next kind of active rest of the week here. Let's put it for you that way. So we're going to be tracking some snow. Let's take a look at some snowfall totals. I mentioned this, I think, a little bit ago. Let's see if I can't find the map here that I had put up really quickly here while we're still on the topic. And yes, then we're going to take a look over at the radar. So I want to see here, though, if where in the world did I put that snowfall map that was going to be for? Ah, there it is. Let's take a look here, folks. Let me flip the screen here for you. And let's take a look at some snowfall totals they had around parts of Nebraska. Let's take a look at this thing here. All right, there we go. It's a pretty decent snowfall totals, actually. Again, Omaha got about 4.5 to about 5.5 inches of snow. Pretty decent there. But when you look compared to some places over around Norfolk, heading back up to Sioux City, Iowa, you can see they got noticeably more snow, around 9 inches. And that orange color you see there is at least a foot of snow. So wasn't very widespread. Well, at least when this particular map was made. But again, that was to kind of be expected that there would certainly be some snowfall accumulations. But, that really heavier snowfall accumulations would probably be a lot more narrow, just given the way that this was set up. Now, this is not including, this was just until noon, about noon today, Central Time. Oh, actually, about 1 o'clock Central Time. So we'll probably have to get an update for this for Iowa. Yes, that's right. Iowa. They still got some snow, and now we're seeing it over around the Chicago area too. So we'll see how much they get. Of course, mind you, folks, as mentioned, especially like right around the city of Chicago, could end up just kind of being, very heavy, wet snow, just given where the temperatures are. Yes, there is a lot of moisture. Yes, there is snow, but temperatures aren't that low, so that liquid to ice ratio is going to be a little bit narrow, so that creates that very heavy, wet snow which is if you ever tried to shovel heavy wet snow, especially when you have a few inches of it, it is it is pretty heavy. With that in mind, there you go. Let's take a look over at our good friend the radar. As mentioned, we were tracking some strong storms that were occurring along kind of that secondary cold front this afternoon. Let's take a look here. We did have one little tornado report around the Tampa area. That'll be interesting to see what becomes of that. But let's take a look right now. We do have a couple of little strong storms down there. Again, there is enough rotation and there is enough of a little reflectivity marking here. When we take a look at this image back here on your right, this is the what we call reflectivity. What the radar is doing here is it's basically sending out a signal and it's detecting the winds. It's detecting the winds in one of two directions. It's either going towards the radar or away from the radar. If it's going away from the radar, in this case, it's going to be colored red. If it's going towards the radar, it's going to be colored green. And what we look for are high values of those colors pitted up right up against each other, much kind of like what we see here. Now, obviously, this is not the strongest of rotation, but it is certainly enough rotation nonetheless. A tornado warning is in effect for this area. And we're looking what? This is Lake Placid down in Florida. Pretty much right around the Sebring area, coming up on, well, to the northwest there of Okeechobee. So, which is always a fun town name to say. We also got this little guy down here. We're looking a little bit higher up. This does have at least a little bit of rotation in it, but maybe not quite yet at the lower levels, but that'll certainly be interesting to see if this shapes up to be anything. So again, with these winter storms, again, because they're so strong and because a lot of times especially the upper levels are, really going at it, as a take case in point, 130-mile-an-hour winds, only about 18,000 feet. Imagine trying to be in a jet trying to fly through that, maybe a little bit of a turbulence there, unless you're going in from the south, in which case it'll probably help you out. But with that in mind, that's why in the wintertime we tend to see such a wide variety here with these strong low pressure systems. We got a lot of warm, moist air on one side, a lot of colder air on the other side. You get, heavy snow on one side, but you can also get severe weather on the other side. Uh, that is kind of the overall principle with wintertime storms. So one of the reasons I love winter is you can literally get everything with one particular storm. You get warm temperatures, severe thunderstorm outbreaks, high winds on one side, like what we saw yesterday out in Dodge City, that area in Kansas. They were seeing gusts over 60 miles an hour and snow. And eventually, maybe it's some colder temperatures there. So again, that's Florida. Again, that front extends its way all the way back into the Carolinas, albeit not quite as much tornadic activity here right now. These storms were a little bit stronger earlier, but they kind of fizzled out a little bit due to the case of losing some of that daytime heating. And it's kind of hard to necessarily sometimes get a severe weather outbreak when your surface temperature is sitting at 63 degrees, but it does happen. Don't get me wrong. But again, you can see how that activity is kind of starting to come to a little bit of an end here. So that front did push through, and look at that, even a little bit of a tornado warning down here around Vanceboro. Let's see here. Maybe if we can't find a radar image that's going to be a little bit closer. Still some wind shear though. But again, not quite as strong as they were earlier. Little hard to tell, but that does look like it does have a little bit of a hook to it, about right there. And even though it's not reds and greens popped up here, we got quite a bit of yellow, and then we have higher values here. So there is probably at least a little bit of rotation, or well, there is some rotation with this thunderstorm right here. Does have at least a little bit of a supercell structure. Again, mainly just a lot in the way of wind shear going on. Doesn't look like it probably has much in the way of hail, but certainly enough of a little spin that it has prompted that tornado warning. So again, we're looking all the way. This is Greenville here out in North Carolina. So we are looking kind of, out in we're looking out. If that makes any sense. Not any big population centers, at least around this immediate area. But again, certainly would be kind of interesting to keep an eye on this little guy. And I vote we may just wait for one more radar scan, see what this thing does. So that is kind of the case right now. Let's go back really quickly. I want to take a look at our little dude over here in Florida. Want to see what that's doing here. And if we can go ahead and we'll just flip on up here See if maybe we can't get another radar scan. So this is a radar scan that is actually a little bit closer. You don't see quite as much of that reflectivity signature, at least as we were seeing earlier here. So we'll just maybe wait another radar scan. But let's go back up here to our good friend over around North Carolina, and we'll take a look at this little guy here. Because again, as mentioned, it doesn't look like much on the radar imagery, but there is at least enough of a little bit of a rotation there on the reflectivity that this probably, again, as mentioned, is certainly rotating. Whether or not there's something on the ground is a little hard to tell, and if it is, it probably wouldn't be very strong, at least right now, just based off what we're seeing here. But again, that's not to say that it couldn't happen, but you get the overall idea. So, pretty interesting here. At this point, we're just going to wait for one more little radar scan, and while we're doing that, let's go ahead and go and take another little quick look here at our good friends, the old weather map. So again, this is kind of what we're looking at here. Here's the cold front. There's that kind of proceeding cold front. Eventually, these two will kind of catch up. There's that little swirl of low pressure, kind of that secondary area of low pressure I was telling you guys about. Again, not very strong, especially when we compare it to this guy back here. But more or less, that wave of low pressure will kind of try to track its way towards the north. And eventually, once we see this guy really begin to occlude tomorrow, we'll see that new area of low pressure popping up somewhere around here. So again, just kind of the life cycle of these systems. Certainly looks like, again, a little bit of rain, at least in some of the last reports here and around the Chicago area. So I tell you what may be kind of cool while we're waiting for our next radar scan is I'm going to see here if maybe we can't pull up a good old webcam here. It's just typing it up here. See if we can maybe take a little bit of a look at what is going on in Chicago right now. As mentioned, it should be snowing there, I do believe. If we go ahead and take those surface observations, we're going to do this very quickly here. Let's take a look over at Round Lake here. Looks like they did have a little bit of snow here. I'm going to pop it up here. Just hold on one second. Let me get it up here. Let me get it up. Let's take a look over here at what we have. Oh yeah, you get to see me here. Let's actually take a look. Yeah, Round Lake. Let's take a look at this camera really quickly here. And there you go. Let me flip the screen here so that you're able to see it. Not the biggest of picture, but if you look carefully, you can see there is at least some snow there on the grass. Looks like some snow there on top of some of those cars. Zoom it in here a little bit so you can see it. Again, the roadways look pretty clear for right now, but it does look like, as mentioned, that there is at least some snow on some of those parking lots there. It's like a car dealership or something along the lines. There's some snow on top of those cars there. Again, they had snow, but it was a little too warm. Probably a little bit there of a wet snow. So pretty cool there nonetheless. Actually, yes. So there is that. All righty. Well, let's see if we can maybe find another one while we're waiting here. I vote we go look for another one. Who here disagrees with that? I think we should all agree that we want to see more of these traffic hounds. These are always fun to take a look at here. Let's see if we can't maybe find one closer to the city of Chicago. Let's find out here, shall we, everybody? Let's see what they got around Joliet. And it certainly looks like it is kind of snowing there, but a little hard to see. Let's go maybe a little bit further up towards the north. Let's go to Wolfbridge. Worthbridge. All right, this is a better one, I think. Let's take a look at this one. We will take a little bit of a look at this one here. There you go. You see that snow there on the grounds. Again, pretty decent there. Roadways certainly wet. At least they're treated. A little bit of snow there on the sides. Traffic, though, moving along. And again, this is out near somewhere Woodbridge, Illinois. So we're looking at the west suburbs here of Chicago. So there you go. A little bit of a wet snow there for you. All righty, let's go ahead here and take one more look at our good friend, the radar imagery. Yeah, we still have that reflectivity signature there, but not necessarily the strongest. This is the one that's out in North Carolina. And let's see if we can't maybe take one more look at our one down around Florida that we were taking a peek at. Let's see. Not quite the signal that we had earlier. Let's flip on the St. Petersburg radar and see if there's anything maybe still there. And yes, while it does still have a little bit of that rotation, we're not really seeing quite the signature that we did earlier. However, this storm, even though we're really far away from the radar at this point, I think we might actually be closer to maybe well, actually, no, I think we're still close to Tampa. This one here is at least certainly rotating in some of the upper levels here, so eventually we'll see if that ends up getting mixed down. Alrighty, everyone, I think that's enough for tonight. I think we've talked about that low pressure enough. I always think they're fun. We'll go ahead and have another weather chat tomorrow evening. We'll talk about more snowfall totals. Ooh, and right as I say that, take a look at this guy. That's a nice little reflection. That's a nice signature right there. See, this is kind of again what I say. We would look for values more like this. We're looking for rotation within a thunderstorm. Again, radar signature doesn't necessarily look the strongest, but again, this thing is certainly rotating at least a little bit. Maybe not quite at, maybe not exactly at the surface, but I don't know. That's a pretty decent. That is a pretty decent signature there. You can see again these higher values of green, higher values of red, where they're pinned up right against each other, is where you'd expect to see some of that rotation there. Let me go ahead and I just want to peek really quickly, though I don't know if we'll be able to see because we're so far out. May or may not be a drop off right there. Let me see here really quickly. And now here I am telling you that we're all going to wait, or that we're all going to wrap this video up, and then and if there's one, I think we'll wait one more radar scan. I just want to see if this thing does something else. This is the correlation coefficient, but we'll talk about that maybe another day. But that is certainly a decent little reflectivity there. We'll see what they do with that. Again, certainly probably some rotation. The question is whether or not it's at the ground. And again, this is I'm kind of actually looking not necessarily in the most ideal location. It's actually kind of right in between two radars, and you think that that would be a good thing, but typically when you're in between two radars, it means you're far away from both of them. But this one, I mean, it's still within the range here. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's pretty interesting there. That's certainly a very nice little, you want the meteorological term for that. It's called a couplet. And there's the next one. Looks like that rotation has kind of gone down just a little bit. Alrighty, so that thing is nothing else. If nothing else, that thing is at least trying to rotate a little bit. So for those of you who enjoy tracking storms, this might be a fun one to watch for at least a little bit. We'll see how long that holds up because it looks like even if it does, it might get some interference from some of this stuff down here eventually. But anyways, alrighty, everyone, that's it for tonight's weather chat. We'll be back here tomorrow evening. We'll talk more about that low pressure. We'll take a look at snowfall totals and anything else that happens to be going on around the area. So until that time, I hope you all have a good rest of your evening. And as always, enjoy that weather.